The dean doesn't even wait for the door to close before he says it. Mr. Thompson, Belmere College is moving forward with expulsion. Just like that. No build-up, no courtesy, no pause long enough to pretend this is hard for him. Malik is still standing when the words hit, backpack hanging off one shoulder, one hand on the chair he hasn't even fully pulled out yet. And for a second, the room goes so still you can hear the air vent above the bookshelf rattling. Expulsion. Not probation. Not suspension. Expulsion. At a school where one accusation can erase 4 years of sacrifice in 4 syllables. And the worst part? He's being expelled for cheating on an exam he knows he didn't cheat on. Across the polished conference table, Dean Howard Whitaker folds his hands like he's announcing a parking policy. In light of the evidence, he says, we have no choice. Evidence. That word lands harder than the accusation. Because if you've ever been the only black student in a room where everybody else already looks convinced, you know what that word really means in moments like this. It doesn't mean truth. It means paperwork. Screenshots, systems, a neat little pile of documents arranged by people with more power than you. And Malik already knows what comes next. If he's expelled, he loses his Hargrove scholarship. If he loses the scholarship, he loses housing. If he loses housing, he has nowhere to stay on campus and nowhere to go except back home to a 2-bedroom apartment where his mother is already sleeping on the couch so his little sister can have her own space. If this sticks, he doesn't just lose college. He loses the future his family has been building around him like it's the first real roof they've ever owned. Dean Whitaker slides a folder across the table. Inside is a printed login record from the college server, a timestamp, a file access report, a highlighted line showing Malik's student credentials opening a restricted exam solutions document at 2:14 a.m., 3 days before the midterm in advanced statistical methods. The same midterm he scored a 98 on. The same midterm the dean now calls academically impossible. Malik looks up. I didn't access this. Whitaker doesn't blink. The system says you did. That doesn't mean I did. Whitaker leans back in his chair, calm, controlled, almost bored. You understand the difficulty here. Your exam contains the same uncommon calculation path and the same numerical error found in the answer key. That part is true. One tiny wrong digit, buried in question 6. A typo in the key. And Malik had the same wrong digit, which is why this whole thing became lethal so fast. Because now they're not accusing him based on suspicion. They're accusing him based on a coincidence that looks like proof. Malik feels his throat tighten. Professor Alvarez, who teaches the course, is sitting 2 seats down. She hasn't said much since he walked in. She looks uncomfortable. Not hostile, not exactly supportive either. Just trapped in the kind of silence that powerful people count on. Malik turns to her. Professor, I told you how I solved that problem. I know, she says quietly. Whitaker cuts in before she can say more. And the Academic Integrity Office reviewed your explanation. No, Malik thinks. You reviewed my explanation. That's what's so wrong here. The dean should not be this deep in a single exam case. Everybody on campus knows that. Deans handle broad conduct issues, donors, crises, scandals, press. They do not personally descend on one student over one test unless there is something bigger under it. But Malik doesn't know that bigger thing yet. Not yet. What he does know is this. He studied for 6 weeks. He tutored other students in that class. He filled 3 yellow legal pads with practice problems. He skipped parties, skipped sleep, skipped meals some nights. And now a man in a tailored suit is looking at him like excellence itself is suspicious. Whitaker opens a second document. Pending your appeal, your scholarship has been placed under review. That hits harder than expulsion. Because expulsion is a future event. The scholarship review starts now. Now means the meal plan gets frozen. Now means his campus job might get paused. Now means the whispers begin before the truth even has time to put on its shoes. Malik finally sits down. When did you decide this? He asks. Whitaker's expression tightens by half an inch. The committee reached its preliminary recommendation this morning. That's not what I asked. For the first time, the dean really looks at him. And there's something cold in that look. Something offended. Not by cheating. By resistance. Malik feels it immediately. He has seen that look before. From teachers who praised him when he was quiet and called him arrogant when he was right. From supervisors who loved his work until he stopped apologizing for being good at it. From people who are comfortable mentoring black students, celebrating black students, posting pictures with black students, as long as those students never force them to feel challenged. Whitaker closes the folder. You will receive formal notice by email. You may submit an appeal within 72 hours. 72 hours. To fight an expulsion. To save a scholarship. To somehow prove a negative. Professor Alvarez clears her throat. Dean Whitaker, I do think the student deserves. He has been given the appropriate process, Whitaker says. Not loud. Just final. And that is when Malik understands something that turns his stomach. This is already decided. This meeting isn't for truth. It's for procedure. It's for getting his body into a chair long enough to say he was informed before they erase him. He stands again. So that's it? Whitaker folds his glasses. That is the present status, yes. Malik stares at him for 2 seconds too long. Enough to feel the warning humming under the dean's composure. Enough to know that if he says what he really wants to say, they'll write that down too. Hostile. Aggressive. Uncooperative. There are rooms where anger makes you look human. And there are rooms where anger makes you look guilty. Malik knows exactly which room this is. So he picks up the folder. He nods once at Professor Alvarez. And he walks out. The hallway outside the dean's office is bright and silent and way too normal for a day that just split his life open. Students pass by laughing. A campus tour group drifts through the rotunda below. Some girl in a Belmere hoodie is taking graduation pictures by the staircase, smiling like the whole world is keeping its promises. Malik grips the folder so hard the paper edges bite into his hand. His phone buzzes. A text from his mother. How did the meeting go, baby? He stops walking. Stares at the screen. Can't answer. Because what do you even type? Hey Ma, remember those double shifts you worked when the rent was short? Remember telling everybody your son was going to be the first Thompson to graduate college? Remember the way you cried in the parking lot when I got the scholarship letter because you said, this changes everything? Yeah. A dean just decided maybe it doesn't. And the humiliation hasn't even started yet. Because by the time Malik makes it downstairs, 3 students near the student center doors go quiet when he passes. Not subtle. Not enough to prove anything. But enough. You know that kind of silence. The kind that tells you the rumor is already moving faster than your name can defend itself. By lunchtime, it gets worse. His ID doesn't open the tutoring lab. At first, he thinks the scanner is lagging. Then he tries again. Red light. Again. Red light. A student worker behind the desk gives him an awkward look through the glass. Sorry, man, she says, barely opening the door. We got a notification. Your tutoring shifts are on hold pending review. Pending review. Everybody loves that phrase when it's happening to someone else. It sounds so neutral, so professional. Like nobody is being destroyed. Malik nods, like it's fine, like his chest isn't caving in. Yeah, he says. Okay. He turns away before she can say anything kind. Sometimes, kindness in public feels worse than cruelty. Cruelty you can fight. Kindness makes you feel seen. By 2 o'clock, the campus paper posts a vague item online. Student athlete suspended from leadership programs amid academic integrity investigation. They don't name him. They don't have to. Everybody in the engineering department knows who just got pulled from tutoring and removed from the scholarship finalist list in the same morning. By 3, his lab partner hasn't answered a single text. By 4, the group chat for his data systems class has split clean in half. One half is saying nothing. The other half is pretending not to talk about him while talking very loudly around him. Crazy how people always seem so perfect until they're not. Honestly, 98 on that exam was already suspicious. I'm just saying, some people will do anything to stay on scholarship. Some people. There it is. The clean, civilized language people use when they don't want to say exactly what they mean. Malik keeps walking. He tells himself if he stops, he'll explode. And if he explodes, they win twice. Rehook won. And here's the thing nobody around him knows yet, not even Malik. Because what started with one exam typo is actually a thread. And when you pull it, what unravels is so much bigger than a test. But what nobody around him knows, what even Malik doesn't fully understand yet, is that this accusation did not begin with the exam. It began months earlier. In a room with polished wood walls and donor plaques, in a conversation about image, about prestige, about who represents Belmere College best. Back then, it sounded harmless. The kind of comment powerful people make and forget 5 minutes later. But Malik remembered it. Because when you grow up learning how power talks, you start recognizing the difference between praise and permission. 3 months before the cheating accusation, Belmere hosted its annual Hargrove Scholars Dinner. Big room, white tablecloths, alumni donors, faculty smiles so tight they look stapled on. Malik had been invited because he was one of the top candidates for the Archer Fellowship, the most prestigious academic scholarship on campus. Full tuition, research funding, summer placement in D.C., direct pipeline to graduate school. For a student like Malik, it wasn't just money. It was insulation, protection, a way to finish school without one emergency pulling the floor out from under him. He had worn the only suit he owned. His mother had ironed the shirt twice. His little sister Nia had FaceTimed him beforehand and said, "Don't let them act like they discovered you." That made him laugh. For about 5 seconds. Because at Belmere, rooms like that always came with a strange performance. People wanting to celebrate his brilliance, while also measuring whether it made them uncomfortable. That night, Dean Whitaker had shaken his hand longer than necessary. "Mr. Thompson," he'd said, smiling for the donor beside him, "you're exactly the kind of student Belmere likes to elevate. Likes to elevate. Not admires. Not respects. Elevate." Like Malik existed below Belmere, until Belmere decided to lift him into relevance. Malik smiled anyway. Because scholarships are often decided by people who can smell irritation under your politeness. Then Whitaker introduced him to Grant Colton, senior, economics major, legacy family, father on the board of trustees, the kind of student who walks into rooms like they were built around his last name. Grant had extended a limp handshake and looked at Malik's name tag. "Oh," he said, "you're the coding guy. Not engineering student. Not fellowship finalist. The coding guy." Then he laughed and added, "Good. I was hoping Belmere would pick someone with a good comeback story this year. The donors eat that up." Whitaker had not corrected him. Not once. He just smiled the thin smile of a man who believes he's too sophisticated to ever be quoted accurately. Malik had let it go. Outwardly. But later that same evening, during the student presentations, Grant froze halfway through a live analytics demo. His forecast model crashed in front of donors, faculty, and committee members. Everybody watched him panic. And Malik, sitting 2 seats away, leaned over and quietly said, "You linked the wrong datasheet. Your formulas are pulling from the sample file." Grant stared at him. Malik took one look at the screen, reached over when Grant nodded, fixed the reference path, and the presentation came back to life. Clean, fast, in front of everyone. The room clapped. Grant finished. But the damage was done. Because if you've ever seen a powerful person rescued by the exact person he thought was beneath him, you know that gratitude is not always the emotion that arrives first. Sometimes it's shame. And shame, in the wrong person, always starts looking for a target. Rehook 2. Remember that dinner. Remember Grant's face when Malik fixed his presentation. Because 3 months later, that moment in that room, it becomes the reason for everything. After the dinner, Malik heard Dean Whitaker in the hallway outside the event room. He wasn't meant to hear it. Whitaker was speaking to someone from advancement, voice low, mildly irritated. "Yes, he's impressive," the dean said, "but let's not pretend presentation doesn't matter. These committees don't just evaluate talent, they evaluate fit." Fit. That word again. Fit is one of those elegant words that can mean anything people are too cowardly to say directly. Too loud, too confident, too black, too impossible to control. Malik kept walking then. He didn't confront him, didn't report it, didn't even tell many people. Because comments like that are designed to evaporate if you try to hold them up to light. But now, standing in front of a dead ID scanner with his job frozen and expulsion papers in his hand, that memory comes back sharp enough to cut. And suddenly, this doesn't feel like an exam case. It feels like a setup wearing an administrative tie. That evening, he finally answers his mother's text. "Can I come home tonight?" She calls in under 10 seconds. What happened? He closes his eyes. And when he tries to say it out loud, the words come out smaller than they should. They said I cheated. Silence. Then, did you? He almost breaks at that. Not because she doubts him, because she has to ask. Because that's what institutions do. They force innocence to go through the humiliation of introduction. No. Her answer is immediate. Then we fight. No speech, no panic, just that. We fight. Malik sits on a bench outside the science building and lets those two words steady him. Because his mother, Denise Thompson, has survived landlords, layoffs, medical bills, and men who lied with confidence. She knows the sound of power trying to make itself seem inevitable. And she has taught him something his professors never could. When somebody wants you scared, the first rebellion is staying clear. By the time Malik gets back to his dorm, Aisha Monroe is waiting outside his door. Arms folded, phone in hand, journalism major, sharp as broken glass. The kind of friend who notices patterns before most people notice a problem. "You look like hell," she says. "Thank you." "You're welcome." He unlocks the door. She follows him in. The room is small, neat, stacked with textbooks, annotated notebooks, and a cheap coffee maker that sounds like it's fighting for its life every morning. On the wall above his desk is a printed photo of his mother and Nia at move-in day, all three of them grinning like they had stolen something back from the world. Aisha waits until he sets the folder down. "Tell me everything." So he does. The file access, the matching typo, the dean, the scholarship review, the suspended tutoring job. Aisha doesn't interrupt until the end. Then she says the one thing nobody else has said yet. "Why is the dean running point on a single academic dishonesty case?" Malik sits on the edge of his bed. "That's what I keep asking. Because that's not normal." "No. Especially not this fast." He looks at her. And now the room changes. Because for the first time all day, somebody else is treating this like what it actually is. Not bad luck. Not an unfortunate misunderstanding. A pattern. Aisha starts pacing. Okay, best case, Whitaker's overstepping because he wants to look tough on integrity. Worst case, he wants you gone specifically. Why? And well, she gives him a flat look. You really need a list? He hates that she's right. Not because he wants victimhood, because he wants a cleaner explanation. A hard drive glitch, a mistaken login, a professor who panicked. Something technical, something fixable. But stories like this are never only about the thing on paper. They're about the person carrying the paper. Aisha pulls up the campus article on her phone. They already changed the fellowship website. Malik stands. What? She turns the screen toward him. 2 hours ago, the Archer Fellowship finalist page listed 6 students. Now it lists 5. His picture is gone. No note, no explanation, just gone. And if you've ever had an institution erase you quietly, you know how violent that can feel. Not dramatic, not loud, just tidy. Like they're folding you out of the story before you can protest the edit. Malik stares at the screen. Aisha watches his face carefully. This isn't just about the exam, she says. No, it isn't. And then she says something that changes the next week of his life. The scholarship committee meets Friday for status reviews. He looks up. So if your scholarship is under review, they have to see the file. That doesn't help me. Maybe it does if the file is dirty. Malik frowns. Aisha. I'm serious. Those committees hate liability. If Whitaker rushed this, if the process is sloppy, if anybody touched records they shouldn't have touched, that committee could crack this open. Could, he says. Could. She sits at his desk and opens her laptop without asking. Start thinking about everything weird around this exam. Everything. Study materials. Lab access. Who knew you were up for Archer? Who was in danger if you stayed in the race? You think this is about the fellowship? I think people with money and titles usually don't move this fast unless something bigger is attached. He wants to argue. Instead, he starts talking. Because once he begins pulling the thread, more comes loose than he expected. 3 weeks before the exam, the statistics department's internal practice portal had gone down for half a day. A temporary backup folder appeared, then disappeared. Malik had emailed the department assistant because one of the sample sets looked mislabeled. No answer. The TA, Ben Saunders, later told students to ignore any files uploaded before noon because the admin side got messy. Messy. Another one of those soft words. Malik also remembers seeing Grant Colton leaving Professor Alvarez's floor late one evening, arguing with someone on the phone, and there was something else. Something small. On the morning exam scores were released, before the accusation began, Dean Whitaker had stopped Malik outside chapel and congratulated him on an exceptional performance. Which would have been normal. Except scores had not yet been posted publicly. Aisha stops typing. Wait. Say that again. Malik does. Her eyes narrow. How would Whitaker know your grade before release? Malik feels a chill crawl up his spine. He didn't think much of it at the time. Faculty and administration sometimes hear things. Maybe he had just assumed the dean was being omniscient in that creepy administrator way. But now it feels wrong. Aisha is already writing it down. What exact words did he use? I don't know. Something like, I hear you delivered one of the strongest exams in the cohort. And then 3 days later you're a cheater. The room goes quiet. Because that's not just suspicious. That's timeline poison. Aisha looks up. If he knew early, then he was watching this before it became a case. Malik leans against the dresser. For the first time all day, anger starts burning hotter than fear. Not wild anger. Clean anger. The kind that gives shape to your spine. He pulls his notebooks from the shelf. 3 yellow legal pads, dates written at the top of every page. He flips through problem sets, formulas, handwritten notes, scratch work, entire solution paths. Including one version of question 6, the question with the typo worked out 2 weeks before the exam using the exact same method he later used on the test. Aisha sees it. Her eyebrows lift. Malik. He turns the page toward her. There it is. His handwriting. The same path. The same structure. But with the correct final digit in practice, because he wasn't copying from a faulty key, he was thinking. This helps, she says. No, it proves I know the method. It doesn't explain the wrong digit on the exam. Aisha nods slowly. Maybe not, but it does something else. What? It proves you didn't suddenly invent competence after stealing a file. That line lands. Because that has been the ugliest part of this from the beginning. Not just the accusation. The implication hiding under it. That a black student doing exceptionally well must have reached beyond the boundaries of what people expected from him. As if excellence needs an accomplice. As if talent becomes suspicious when it comes from the wrong body. Aisha stands. Tomorrow we get copies of everything they'll release. Policy handbook, appeal timeline, scholarship review rules, access logs if we can. And if they won't give them willingly, we make enough noise that they have to. Noise to who? She smiles, but there's no humor in it. To anybody who likes sunlight. That night Malik barely sleeps. Not because he's afraid of the appeal. Because he starts realizing how deep the hole may already be. Dark moment, rewritten with sensory detail. At 1:12 MI, he checks his student portal. The screen glows blue in the dark room. That particular shade of blue that exists only on laptops at 1 a.m., when the rest of the world is asleep and you are alone with whatever the machine decides to tell you. His meal plan is restricted to base access only. He reads it twice. then closes the tab, opens it again to make sure it didn't change. It didn't. At 1:47 a.m., an email arrives from Housing Services, informing him that continued residence eligibility may be impacted by unresolved disciplinary status. He sets the laptop on the bed next to him. The mini fridge hums across the room. That dumb low hum it makes all night, every night, the one he stopped noticing months ago. He notices it now. It sounds like something trying very hard to stay alive. He doesn't move for a while. At 2:03 a.m., another email arrives from financial aid. Your scholarship disbursement is temporarily paused pending administrative review. You could read that sentence in 5 seconds. It sits in his chest like a stone dropped from a height. He thinks about his mother. Her nursing home shift ends at 6 a.m. She'll be on her feet for 8 hours, then drive home in the dark, then sleep 3 hours, then do it again. She has been doing some version of that since before he could remember. She did it so he wouldn't have to. And now 3 emails have arrived in the polite, professional language of a system doing exactly what it was designed to do. No anger in the words. No cruelty you can point to. Just sentences, clean sentences. Sentences that together form a cage so precise you almost want to applaud the engineering. Aisha is asleep in the desk chair, having refused to leave until he stopped pretending he was fine. Her head is tilted sideways, legal pad still in her lap, pen loosely in her hand. The room is cold. He didn't realize it until now. He pulls his hoodie tighter and sits with the blue light on his face and the hum of the mini fridge in the room and the weight of 3 emails making him feel like something very large is slowly sitting down on his chest. This is the part people don't always see in stories like this. Not the public accusation. Not the big courtroom-style reversal. This part, the private hour. The one where you are alone with the machinery. Where every email sounds polite. Every sentence sounds professional. And yet together, they form a trap so precise you can almost admire it. End dark moment. By sunrise, Malik has 2 choices. Either accept that the institution is bigger than him, or make them explain every single inch of what they did. He chooses the second one. Rehook 3. But here's what he doesn't know yet. Somewhere in those records, in those timestamps, in those policy documents, there is one detail that Whitaker cannot explain. One detail that will crack everything open. And they are about to find it. And by noon the next day, something cracks. It starts small. Aisha gets a copy of the Belmere Academic Integrity Policy through a friend in student government. Then another copy from an archived faculty portal. They are not identical. Same title, same formatting. Different clause under emergency suspensions. In one version, the dean can recommend interim action only after the faculty review board submits a determination. In the version attached to Malik's email, that wording has changed to before. One word. Before. Aisha stares at the 2 documents side by side. No, she says. Malik looks over her shoulder. That one word changes everything. Because if the archived policy is correct, Whitaker moved against him before the faculty board was allowed to make a final call. Which means this wasn't just aggressive. It may have been improper. Maybe worse. They print both copies. Circle the line. And Aisha, being Aisha, doesn't stop there. She calls Professor Alvarez. To Malik's surprise, Alvarez answers. And to his even greater surprise, she agrees to meet. Not in her office. At a coffee shop off campus. Which tells you immediately how scared she is. When Malik and Aisha arrive, Professor Lena Alvarez is already seated in the back corner, coat still on, coffee untouched. She looks like someone who has spent 24 hours rehearsing what she should and should not say. I can't discuss confidential student records. She begins. Aisha nods. Understood. Malik says nothing. Professor Alvarez finally looks at him. I'm sorry this is happening. He studies her face. There's genuine discomfort there. Guilt too. Not enough to absolve her. Enough to matter. Did you think I cheated? He asks. She hesitates. That hesitation hurts more than he expected. I thought the exam anomaly needed investigation, she says carefully. The matching error was unusual. Unusual enough for expulsion. No? Her answer comes fast this time. Malik leans forward. Then why am I here? Professor Alvarez glances toward the window, then lowers her voice. Because this stopped being my case very quickly. Aisha and Malik exchange a look. Alvarez continues. When I flagged the exam for review, I expected the Academic Integrity Office to request statements and maybe conduct a preliminary inquiry. Instead, within hours, Dean Whitaker's office called asking for copies of the exam, the key, your performance history, and the grading spreadsheet. Why? Malik asks. He said the matter had scholarship implications. There it is. Scholarship. Again. Aisha asks, did you send them? I was instructed to. By who? Alvarez doesn't answer directly, which is answer enough. Then she says the sentence that changes the shape of the case. The answer key with the error was not the final version. Malik feels every muscle in his back go tight. What? Professor Alvarez exhales. There were two versions. My original solution set had a transposed digit on question 6. Ben, the teaching assistant, caught it the night before the exam. We corrected the official key before grading. Aisha blinks. Then how did the wrong digit become evidence against Malik? That, Professor Alvarez says, voice barely above a whisper, is what I no longer understand. For a second, nobody speaks. Because if the official grading key had been corrected, then the dean's entire case is built on a version of the answer key that should not have been the basis for anything. Malik's mind races. Did my exam actually match the corrected key? Alvarez nods. Mostly, except for that one digit. Then why wasn't that the discussion? She looks at him, and now the guilt is unmistakable. Because when I raised that issue, I was told the presence of the old error suggested prior access to draft materials. Draft materials. You can feel the twist tightening. Not only are they saying he cheated, they're saying he cheated so early he got the draft. That sounds sophisticated. It also sounds insane. Aisha asks the next question immediately. Who had access to the draft key? Professor Alvarez goes still. Then very quietly. Department staff. Ben. Me. And administration, if requested. Administration. Aisha sits back. And Malik realizes this story just stepped into a much darker room. Because now the question is no longer whether he accessed an exam file. The question is, why the dean's office is using a draft answer key most students never could have seen. Professor Alvarez opens her bag and slides out a folded sheet. I shouldn't give you this, she says. It's a timeline of file revisions from the department's shared drive. Question 6, corrected at 11:42 p.m. the night before the exam. Accessed again at 7:08 a.m. by administrative review account. Aisha looks up sharply. What's administrative review account? Alvarez shakes her head. I don't know who specifically uses it. I only know I saw the log before the access history was restricted. Before it was restricted. There's another one of those lines you don't forget. Malik takes the paper. The edges tremble slightly in his hand. Professor Alvarez stares at him for a moment. Then, she says, For what it's worth, Mr. Thompson, your work has never looked borrowed to me. It has always looked like yours. That should feel good. Instead, it makes him angry. Because she knew enough to say that now. Not then. Not in the room where it mattered. They leave the coffee shop with more questions than answers, but now there's a pulse under the case. Something living. Something hidden. Aisha is halfway through a sentence about metadata and access chains when Malik's phone rings. Unknown number. He answers. Hello? Mr. Thompson, this is Sandra Liu from the Hargrove Scholarship Committee. We're conducting our scheduled review tomorrow afternoon. You are expected to appear. Malik stops walking. Aisha stops too, reading his face. Sandra continues. This is not a disciplinary hearing. It concerns scholarship status, in light of the pending integrity matter. In light of... Another clean phrase. Malik asks, Will Dean Whitaker be there? Yes. Of course he will. Will I be allowed to present materials? A pause. Relevant materials? Yes. He thanks her and ends the call. Aisha doesn't wait. What? He tells her. And for the first time since the accusation began, she smiles like she smells blood. Good. Good? Yes. Because committees are where administrators go when they think paper will protect them. She points to the revision log in his hand. And if Whitaker walks into that room thinking this is routine, he's already made his biggest mistake. That night they build the file, the notebooks, the dated practice problems, email timestamps, policy copies, a written account of Whitaker congratulating Malik before scores were public, Professor Alvarez's timeline, carefully referenced without naming her directly. Aisha also digs through archived campus newsletters and donor announcements, and at 11:18 p.m., she finds something. Malik. He looks up from the notebook he's been annotating. She turns the laptop screen toward him slowly, like she's not sure she wants him to see it yet. It's a press release from the previous year. The Archer Fellowship, Belmere's most prestigious student award, was partially endowed by a family foundation. He leans closer, reads the name, reads it again. Colton. The Colton Family Foundation. The same Colton. Trustee's son, Grant Colton. The same Grant who had mocked Malik at the dinner. The same Grant who was also a finalist for the fellowship. The same Grant who would move one spot closer to the award if Malik vanished. Malik stares at the screen. No one says it immediately. Because once you say it out loud, the theory stops being theoretical. Aisha finally does. If Whitaker wanted Grant clean for Archer, and you were in the way. Malik finishes the sentence. Then I didn't need to cheat. He needed me accused. Sleep doesn't happen at all now. Just preparation. At 3 a.m., Malik prints every document twice. At 4:10, his mother calls on her lunch break from the nursing home. Tell me what time I need to be there. Ma, you don't have to. Text me the building. There are moments when love is not tender. It's disciplined. His mother does not cry, does not ramble, does not give speeches. She just says, if they're going to look my son in the face while they lie, they can do it with me in the building. By morning, Belmere is pretending to be normal again. Students crossing the quad. Coffee lines. Backpacks. Laptops. Young people moving like the future is a hallway you simply keep walking down. Meanwhile, Malik is carrying a binder that might determine whether his life stays assembled. The Hargrove Committee meeting is in Hawthorne Hall, 4th floor, Conference Suite B. A room designed to look expensive without seeming flashy. Muted carpet, walnut table, water pitchers nobody touches. The kind of room where power likes to call itself stewardship. By the time Malik arrives, Dean Whitaker is already there. So is Sandra Liu from the committee, plus 4 members Malik recognizes from campus events and fundraising brochures. Chairwoman Elaine Porter, retired federal judge, silver hair, unreadable expression. Dr. Miriam Kane, alumna and biomedical researcher. Thomas Reeve, finance executive and donor liaison. And Professor Samuel Boyd, faculty representative from the history department. Grant Colton is not there, which somehow makes his presence feel even bigger. Whitaker nods at Malik with professional detachment. Like yesterday, he didn't try to push him out of school. Mr. Thompson. Malik takes his seat. His mother sits quietly along the back wall, hands folded in her lap, eyes steady. She works night shifts and still came in pressed scrubs under a cardigan because she didn't have time to go home and change. If you want to understand pressure, understand this. Sometimes the hardest part is not defending yourself. It's defending yourself in front of the people who believed in you first. Chairwoman Porter begins. This committee's role is limited. We are not here to adjudicate academic guilt. We are here to determine whether scholarship eligibility should be suspended or revoked pending institutional findings. Limited role. That should have worried Malik. Instead, it makes him calmer. Because people in limited roles sometimes see more clearly. They don't need to protect the whole machine. They only need to decide whether a particular piece of it smells wrong. Porter turns to Whitaker. Dean, please summarize the administrative basis for review. Whitaker does exactly what men like him always do when they think the room belongs to them. He gets smoother, controlled, efficient. He outlines the alleged unauthorized file access, the matching answer path irregularity, the seriousness of integrity concerns, and the need to protect the reputation of Belmir's scholarship programs. He never once says Malik's name with malice. He doesn't need to. He uses process like a blade. When he's done, Chairwoman Porter turns to Malik. "Mr. Thompson, you may respond." This is the moment. The room tightens, and Malik feels that old familiar temptation to explain everything too fast, to overperform credibility, to make himself extra polite, extra measured, extra harmless. A lot of black students learn that instinct early. We call it professionalism. Sometimes it's just survival in a tie. But today Malik doesn't shrink. He opens the binder. "Thank you," he says. "I want to be very clear. I did not access any restricted exam file, and I did not cheat. What I do have are records that show this process may have relied on incorrect documents and administrative overreach." Whitaker's jaw hardens almost invisibly. "Good." Malik begins with the notebooks. He passes copies down the table. Dated practice work, spanning 6 weeks. Multiple versions of the same statistical methods used on the exam. A progression of mastery, not a sudden leap. He speaks plainly, not dramatically. He explains how he studies, how he annotates, how he practices by hand because if I can't rebuild the logic from scratch, I don't trust that I know it. Professor Boyd flips pages more slowly than the others. Dr. Kane circles a date. Whitaker remains expressionless. Then Malik introduces the policy discrepancy. 2 versions of the academic integrity procedure. One archived, one attached to his notice. The word before replacing after in the emergency action clause. Thomas Reeve sits up. "Where did this archived version come from?" "Student Government Legislative Archive," Aisha says from the doorway. Nobody noticed her come in. Because of course she came. She's not inside the committee seating area, just near the entrance, legal pad in hand, expression neutral enough to pass for air. Whitaker turns. "This is a closed review," Chairwoman Porter says, without looking at him. "Then address the evidence, Dean." That changes the temperature. Just slightly. But enough. Malik keeps going. He recounts Whitaker congratulating him on his exam performance before grades were public. Whitaker immediately interjects. "I speak to many students about academic matters." "Did you know my score before release?" Malik asks. Whitaker looks at Porter, not Malik. "I was made aware that his performance was unusually high." "By whom?" Dr. Kane asks. "A beat. Just one beat. But the room notices it. Faculty communication." "Which faculty?" Porter asks. Whitaker's answer is careful. "I don't recall specific informal channels." The room gets quieter. Not louder. That's how you know control is shifting. Powerful people don't usually get shouted at first. They get asked the same precise question twice. Then Malik places the revision timeline on the table. And now even Porter leans forward. He explains what Professor Alvarez told him, without naming her as a source of confidential commentary. He only references the file record, question 6 corrected in the answer key before the exam, then accessed afterward by administrative review account. Dr. Kane reads the page. Her eyes narrow. "Dean Whitaker, why is a draft key relevant here?" Whitaker answers instantly. "Because the student's exam reflected the draft error." "That would only matter if the draft were the operative comparison document," Kane says. Whitaker folds his hands. "The presence of the draft error suggests pre-access to materials." Porter looks up from the log. "Or it suggests administrative mishandling of versions." Whitaker doesn't answer. And Malik feels it. The first crack. Tiny. Clean. Real. But it is about to get worse for the dean. Because Porter asks a question nobody seems ready for. "Who else had access to this draft key?" Whitaker says, "Department personnel and any authorized reviewer." Names. Chairwoman. "With respect, the issue before us is whether this student—" "Names," Porter repeats. Whitaker's smile thins. "Professor Alvarez, her teaching assistant, designated staff, and potentially administrators on review." Potentially meaning? Meaning access pathways vary. Porter sets down the page. "Then the integrity concern is broader than this student. If unauthorized draft circulation occurred, that implicates institutional controls, not merely scholarship status. There it is. The committee just stopped treating Malik as the whole problem. And once that happens, the story changes. Whitaker knows it too. He straightens slightly. Chairwoman, I think it's important we not lose sight of the immediate issue. Mr. Thompson's login credentials access restricted files. Malik opens to the next tab in his binder. About that, he places another document on the table. His campus employment record. At 2:14 a.m., on the night of the alleged file access, Malik was signed into the Eastside Community Learning Center, 23 minutes off campus, tutoring local high school students in algebra under a university outreach program. Not airtight by itself, but enough to complicate the server claim. Whitaker glances down, then back up. Physical presence elsewhere does not preclude remote access. Malik nods. I agree. Which is why I'm also submitting the Learning Center sign-out footage request receipt and the text chain from that night, with the program supervisor confirming I stayed late to close the room. Porter reviews the submission. Dr. Kane asks, do we know from what device the file was accessed? Whitaker answers, a library terminal. Aisha says from the doorway. Then where's the camera footage? Every head turns. Whitaker's face hardens. Porter studies Aisha for a moment, then looks back at Whitaker. Is there footage? Whitaker says, the library cameras on that floor were under routine maintenance. Aisha cannot help herself. Convenient. Porter gives her one warning glance, but she doesn't dismiss her. That matters. Malik breathes slowly. He can feel the room tipping, but not enough yet. Not enough to save him. Because the one thing still sitting there like a loaded gun is the server log. His credentials. His account. His name. As long as that document stands untouched, Whitaker still has a spine for the accusation. And then Dr. Kane asks the question that changes everything. Who generated this access report? Whitaker says, it's security. Signed by? Buddy? Whitaker slides the report forward. Porter reads it. Then reads it again. She sets it down. Doesn't speak for a moment. This isn't signed by IT security, she says finally. It's exported by administrative compliance. Silence. Whitaker responds carefully. Administrative compliance compiles the record package. Based on raw IT logs? Yes. Then where are the raw IT logs? Whitaker pauses. Just for a second. Too long. And if you've ever watched a powerful person realize the script is no longer theirs, you know that pause. It is never huge. It is microscopic. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. They were summarized for the committee packet, he says. Porter leans back. I would like the raw logs. Whitaker says, that may not be immediately possible. Why? Because student data systems require... Porter cuts him off. Dean Whitaker, are you telling this committee that a scholarship revocation has been initiated based on a summarized administrative export rather than a direct IT-certified chain of access? Nobody moves. Malik feels his mother in the back of the room sit a little straighter. Whitaker says, I am telling the committee that the institution has sufficient reason to doubt this student's academic integrity. And there it is. He doesn't answer the question. Because he can't. Porter notices. Everyone notices. Even Thomas Reeve, who looked half asleep 10 minutes earlier, now has both elbows on the table. Porter turns to Sandra Liu. Can we obtain certified logs today? Sandra, clearly uncomfortable, says, possibly, if requested through central systems. Request them. Whitaker steps in immediately. That is unnecessary duplication. I'm flucked. Porter looks at him for the first time with visible impatience. Unnecessary to whom? No one speaks. The room has crossed a line now. It is no longer Malik defending himself against an accusation. It is a dean defending the way the accusation was built. And what he doesn't know yet, what he absolutely does not know, is that the final piece has already arrived. Sandra's laptop pings. She glances down. Then up. Chairwoman, she says slowly. It sent a preliminary response. There is an attached note. Porter motions for her to continue. Sandra reads, brow furrowing. This says the original access report request did not come from IT security. It came from the Office of the Dean of Academic Affairs through a manual records pull. Nobody breathes. Whitaker speaks quickly. That is normal in expedited integrity reviews. Porter extends a hand. Let me see it. Sandra turns the laptop. Porter reads. Then Dr. Kane. Then Reeve. The silence becomes something else now. Not uncertainty. Recognition. Because there on the screen, in black and white, is a detail none of them expected. The manual records request was submitted 40 minutes before Professor Alvarez officially referred the exam anomaly for integrity review. 40 minutes before. Malik doesn't understand it for a second. Then he does. Then everybody does. Whitaker's office requested Malik's access history before the case formally existed. Before the referral. Before the process. Before the supposed evidence trail should even have begun. Chairwoman Porter lifts her eyes. Slowly. Dean Whitaker. She doesn't rush the next words. Why was your office requesting this student's log history before the faculty referral was filed? Whitaker answers too fast. As I said, I had been informally alerted. By whom? No answer. By whom? She asks again. The room holds its breath. He adjusts his cuff. I don't recall. Porter closes the laptop with deliberate calm. That is not credible. It isn't a shout. It's worse. It's the sound of authority, withdrawing its courtesy. Whitaker tries again. This student was already under consideration due to concerns about scholarship-related conduct and high-level performance irregularities. High-level performance irregularities? Professor Boyd repeats. You mean his grade? Whitaker realizes too late how ugly that sounds. Malik sees it happen on his face. The calculation. The retreat. But the room has him now. Dr. Kane turns to Malik. Mr. Thompson, was there any reason you believe your candidacy for the Archer Fellowship would have generated unusual attention? Malik could answer diplomatically. He could downplay. He could protect everybody from discomfort. Instead, he tells the truth. I was one of the top candidates, and one of the other finalists was Grant Colton. Reeve looks up immediately. The Colton family fellow? Yes. A tiny silence. Then Aisha, from the doorway again, says what nobody in the room wants said aloud. The fellowship is funded by his family's foundation. Whitaker snaps, This is inappropriate. Porter doesn't even look at him. Is it true? Reeve answers instead, reluctantly. Yes, partially. We have defriend our doing. Porter turns back to Whitaker. Did you discuss Mr. Thompson's scholarship status in any context involving Mr. Colton's candidacy? No. Did anyone from the Colton family communicate concern about the fellowship competition? Whitaker's face stays disciplined. No. Did you or did you not initiate an administrative inquiry into this student before the formal faculty referral? Whitaker says nothing. And then, just when you think the scene cannot tilt harder, the door opens. Professor Alvarez steps in. Nobody invited her. Nobody stops her, either. She's holding a manila envelope in one hand and a kind of terror in the other. Chairwoman Porter, she says, breathing slightly hard. I apologize for the interruption. I was informed there were questions regarding the exam revision history. Whitaker stands. This is highly irregular. Porter says, Sit down, Dean. He sits. Professor Alvarez crosses to the table and places the envelope in front of Porter. What is this? Porter asks. A copy of the original grading memo Ben Saunders sent me the morning after the exam. Porter opens it. Alvarez continues, voice steadier now. In that memo, my teaching assistant noted that 3 students exhibited unusual overlap with older departmental practice materials. Mr. Thompson was not one of them. Whitaker's head turned sharply. Alvarez keeps going. Later that day, I was asked by Dean Whitaker's office to isolate only Mr. Thompson's exam for separate review because, quote, his profile raises broader concerns. The room freezes. You can feel it. The exact second the euphemisms die. Profile. Raises broader concerns. Everybody at the table understands what those words are doing. Whitaker speaks through clenched control. Professor Alvarez, you are mischaracterizing. No, she says, and it is the first time she sounds angry. I am correcting the record. Malik doesn't move. He barely blinks. Because after 2 days of having his reality professionally repackaged by people with titles, hearing someone say the plain thing out loud feels almost unreal. Porter reads the memo, then hands it to Dr. Kane. Then Reeve. Boyd adjusts his glasses, face grim. Whitaker tries one last avenue. Even if there were preliminary concerns regarding multiple students, Mr. Thompson's credentials still accessed. Professor Alvarez cuts in. Ben found another problem yesterday. Every eye turns. She looks directly at Porter. The library terminal ID attached to the report was not a public student machine. It was an administrative station used during network maintenance. Student logins can appear there if credentials are tested or cached by staff. Malik feels the air leave his lungs. Aisha actually whispers, "No way." Professor Alvarez nods once. I confirmed it with campus systems this morning after Ben rechecked the hardware tag. Porter says, to be clear, you're saying the terminal cited as evidence may not indicate student use at all. Yes. Whitaker speaks, but now the composure is cracked. That is not a final determination. No, Alvarez says, but it means it should never have been presented as conclusive. And now the committee has it. Not suspicion, not emotion, not a plea, process corruption, selective targeting, and evidence sold as certainty before it was even verified. Dean Whitaker still tries. He still thinks there's room to frame this as confusion. Chairwoman, while unfortunate discrepancies may exist, the broader pattern of concern remains. Porter puts up a hand. No, just one word. Sharp enough to stop the room. She looks at Malik, then at his mother in the back, then at the stack of documents spread across the table like the remains of something carefully staged. When a scholarship review is initiated, she says, voice controlled and cold, this committee expects the institution to act with extraordinary precision. What I am seeing instead is preemptive action, altered procedural language, uncertified access reporting, selective case targeting, and evidence that may have been interpreted in a grossly misleading manner. Whitaker opens his mouth. Porter's gaze hardens. Do not interrupt me again. He closes it. If you had walked into the room 20 minutes earlier, you would have seen a dean and a student. One carrying authority. One carrying risk. Now you are looking at something else entirely. A man whose thought process could bury truth. And a paper trail that decided to speak before he could silence it. Porter turns to Sandra Liu. I want the following effective immediately. Scholarship review suspended. Disbursement restored pending independent investigation. Written notice sent to Housing and Financial Aid that no adverse action is to proceed under this allegation. Sandra starts typing. Fast. Porter continues. I also want a full preservation order on all communications, access requests, and policy revisions touching this case. Reeve adds, including donor communications. Whitaker finally loses the smoothness. This is a profound overreaction. No, Porter says, it is the first appropriate reaction this student has received. There is a silence after that line that feels almost sacred. Because it doesn't just help Malik. It restores language. It names what happened correctly. And for people who have spent their whole lives being told to calm down while systems overreach around them, that matters more than outsiders often understand. Malik's mother lowers her head for 1 second and presses a hand over her mouth. Not because she's surprised. Because she held herself together until somebody finally told the truth in a room with microphones and minutes. Whitaker makes one last attempt to gather himself. Mr. Thompson's academic case remains unresolved. Porter nods. Then it will be resolved by proper channels, without administrative contamination. She closes the file. This review is concluded. And just like that, the room breaks. Chairs move. Laptops close. People stand. But the real ending doesn't happen in the meeting. It happens in the hallway. Because truth in institutions rarely explodes all at once. First, it leaks. Then it spreads. Then the people who were very comfortable being silent start developing consciences at astonishing speed. By 5 o'clock that evening, the campus paper has a new headline. Scholarship Committee halts review. orders independent investigation into integrity process. By 6, students who wouldn't answer Malik's texts are sending versions of the same message. Yo, I didn't know it was like that. By 7, the tutoring lab supervisor calls to say his shifts are restored immediately. By 8, housing sends an apologetic correction. By 9, Professor Boyd has formally requested the Faculty Senate review academic misconduct procedures involving selective escalation and administrative interference. And by midnight, Belmere has a full-blown institutional problem. Because once one committee sees misconduct, other people start checking their own corners. The next 3 days unravel Whitaker piece by piece. It turns out the policy PDF attached to Malik's notice was not just outdated. It had been re-exported from an internal template after someone in academic affairs requested clarified interim authority language less than 2 hours before his meeting. It turns out Ben Saunders, the TA, had emailed concerns about 2 other exams showing near copy patterns from legacy practice materials, but those students were never formally escalated. One of those students was Grant Colton. That detail detonates quietly at first, then everywhere. Grant had not stolen the current exam. He had apparently studied from a packet of older departmental problems that should not have been circulating. His answers resembled previous materials enough to flag concern, but because those patterns did not connect neatly to a dramatic accusation, they stayed buried. Malik's case, meanwhile, came with the optics Whitaker needed: a top-performing scholarship finalist, a suspiciously strong score, a log report he could package into administrative certainty. Then the final knife comes out. IT certifies the raw log history. Malik's credentials were indeed used, but through an admin-authenticated maintenance station during a nighttime access validation sweep run by staff credentials tied to administrative compliance. In plain English, his username was present in a system test. Not proof he ever sat at that machine. Not proof he opened the file. Not proof of cheating. Just a technical artifact repackaged as guilt. Once that lands, the rest becomes impossible to defend. Whitaker is placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Administrative leave. Funny how institutions suddenly love caution when the title on the door changes. Grant Colton withdraws from Archer consideration for personal reasons. Nobody on campus believes that wording for 1 second. Professor Alvarez issues a formal statement acknowledging that her exam concern was prematurely and improperly expanded beyond the bounds of faculty review. It's not perfect, but it's public, and public matters. Because humiliation done in public deserves correction in public too. The independent review finishes 6 weeks later. By then, the campus has split into the usual camps. Some people are genuinely horrified. Some are defensive. Some are suddenly experts in nuance now that the victim is no longer isolated. And some are doing what people always do when injustice becomes expensive to acknowledge. They pretend it was just a misunderstanding. Malik never lets himself use that word. A misunderstanding is when 2 people hear each other wrong. This was a process designed to move faster against him than it would have moved against someone safer. The review finds no evidence that Whitaker fabricated the original exam anomaly. But it does find that he selectively escalated Malik's case before formal referral, relied on uncertified technical records, used draft materials in a misleading way, and failed to disclose potential conflicts around fellowship implications. The language is cautious. Institutional reports always are. But the meaning is clear enough. He tried to bury a student under the appearance of procedure. He counted on silence. He counted on speed. He counted on the old math that says if you move quickly enough against a black student, the burden of recovery will be too heavy for him to survive intact. He was wrong. The Archer Fellowship Committee reconvenes at the end of the semester. This time, Malik does not expect anything. That's an important part of stories like this. People think vindication feels triumphant all the way through. It doesn't. Sometimes, once you've spent weeks fighting to be seen as innocent, your body forgets how to receive good news without flinching. So when the email comes, he reads it twice. Then a 3rd time. Dear Mr. Thompson, following final review, the committee is pleased to award you the Archer Fellowship in recognition of your academic excellence, research potential, and extraordinary integrity under pressure. Extraordinary integrity under pressure. He sits staring at that sentence while the room blurs. Aisha is the one who screams. His mother, on speakerphone, starts crying so hard she can't speak for a full minute. Nia gets on the line and says, "Tell them to spell your name right on the big check." That finally makes him laugh. A real laugh. The first one in weeks. The fellowship ceremony is held in the same hall where Dean Whitaker once shook his hand for donor cameras and called him the kind of student Belmere likes to elevate. Whitaker, of course, is nowhere in sight. Grant isn't there either. But the people who watched quietly from the edges last time are there now. Faculty, students, donors, committee members, reporters from the campus paper and the local city outlet that picked up the investigation. The room is fuller than usual. Scandal does that. So does truth. When Malik walks to the podium, there's applause. Not the polite kind. The kind that knows what happened. The kind that knows why this moment matters beyond one student and one campus. He stands there for a second, looking out at rows of faces. Some proud. Some ashamed. Some studying him carefully, maybe hoping he'll be gracious enough to make everybody comfortable again. He doesn't. Not exactly. He thanks the committee. He thanks Professor Alvarez for correcting the record. He thanks his mother, who never taught me to confuse silence with dignity. Then, he says the line people will quote all year. Being doubted did not break me, but watching how quickly this system was willing to call excellence suspicious, that taught me more about this institution than any class I've taken here. You can feel the room inhale. He keeps going. I am standing here today because documents survived, because a few people asked better questions, and because my life was not worth less than someone else's convenience. No raised voice. No grand performance. Just clarity. And clarity, in rooms built on euphemism, sounds almost revolutionary. He looks toward the back, where his mother is standing with one hand over her chest. When people tell stories like this later, they usually focus on the ending, the reversal, the exposure, the moment the truth came out. But I want you to remember something else. The room is silent now. The truth did not become true when a committee finally said it out loud. It was true when I was sitting alone in my dorm reading emails that treated me like a threat. It was true when people stopped answering my texts. It was true when my scholarship was frozen before the facts were. That's the part we have to fix. No one moves. No one coughs. No one checks a phone. This is what real retention feels like in a room, by the way. Not editing tricks. Not music. Just somebody saying the thing everybody else kept trying not to name. Then Malik lets the final part breathe. I used to think the goal was to prove I belonged here. Now I know that was never the right question. The real question is whether a place deserves what people like me have to survive in order to give it our brilliance. That one lands like a door closing. Afterward, people come up in a line. Some sincere. Some awkward. Some apologizing in the indirect way institutions teach people to apologize. Professor Boyd shakes his hand with both of his and says, "You made this place better than it was." A first-year engineering student, Malik barely knows steps forward and says, voice shaking, "Thank you, because I thought if this could happen to you, it could happen to any of us." Malik answers honestly, "It can." Then he adds, "That's why you document everything," which gets a small laugh. Small, but needed. Because sometimes the healthiest thing in the world is letting the room exhale without losing the seriousness of what just happened. Weeks later, after finals, after interviews, after the semester finally stops feeling like a courtroom in disguise, Malik goes back to the Eastside Community Learning Center. Same folding chairs. Same dry erase markers. Same kids who care less about campus politics than whether he can explain systems of equations without making them hate numbers forever. One of the boys, 10th grade, oversized hoodie, too smart to pretend otherwise, asks him, "You really almost got kicked out?" Malik smiles a little. "Yeah. What'd you do?" "Nothing." The boy stares. "That's messed up." "It was." The boy thinks about that, then says, "So why'd you come back?" Malik looks around the room. At the scuffed floors. At the cheap posters. At the future. sitting in plastic chairs, pretending not to need encouragement. And he says the truest thing he has learned. Because if people only believe in you when it's easy, that's not belief. And if you let unfairness decide where you stop showing up, it keeps winning long after the paperwork ends. The kid nods like he understands part of it now, and the rest will hit him later. That's fine. Some lessons are like that. They arrive twice. The college eventually releases a revised integrity policy, certified log requirements, independent faculty first review, conflict disclosure rules, emergency scholarship protections. It all reads very official, very responsible, very committed to learning from this incident. Malik reads the new policy once, then closes the PDF. Policies matter. But policies are not courage. People are. The courage was Professor Alvarez walking into that room when it would have been safer not to. The courage was Aisha refusing to let the story stay neat. The courage was his mother showing up exhausted and unafraid. The courage was him, honestly, staying in the fight long enough for the truth to catch up, because that's another thing stories like this often leave out. Sometimes the most heroic act is not exposing corruption. It's surviving accusation without becoming the version of yourself the accusation wants. Staying sharp without going numb. Staying human without begging. Staying clear when humiliation tries to make you perform your pain for people who haven't earned it. Years later, people at Belmere will still talk about the Whitaker case. Some will remember the administrative leave. Some will remember the scholarship committee meeting. Some will remember the speech. But the people who really understood what happened will remember something quieter. A student sat in a room full of polished authority while a dean tried to turn process into destiny. And he did not fold. Not when they froze the money. Not when they locked the doors. Not when the rumor moved faster than the facts. Not when powerful people used words like fit and profile and concern to disguise exactly what they were doing. He kept the notes. He kept the timeline. He kept the truth long enough for other people to stop pretending they couldn't see it. And in the end, that was the part the dean could never control. Not the headline. Not the committee. Not the fellowship. The truth. Because truth is patient in ways power never is. Power likes speed. Truth likes records. Power likes rooms. Truth likes doors opening at the wrong time for the wrong people. Power likes assumptions. Truth likes one tiny detail refusing to die. That is why this story matters. Not because a bad man got embarrassed. Not because a good student got saved at the last minute. It matters because somewhere, every day, somebody is being told a system is simply following procedure while that system leans on them with a thumb it swears is invisible. And if you've ever been that person, you know how lonely that can feel. You know how quickly doubt becomes administrative. You know how expensive innocence can get. But you also know this. One clean note, one preserved email, one witness who finally tells the truth, one question asked at the right table. Sometimes that is all it takes to crack open something that looked untouchable. Malik keeps the original expulsion notice in a folder at home. Not out of bitterness. Out of memory. On the back of it, months later, Nia writes a line in purple marker. They thought paper could erase a person. He framed that. Because she was right. That was the whole fight. And the reason the ending feels satisfying is not just that the scholarship committee exposed everything. It's that they exposed something institutions rely on all the time. The hope that shame will make innocent people disappear before proof has time to breathe. Malik didn't disappear. He stayed. He answered. He documented. He walked into the room they prepared for his removal and left with his name returned to him in full. And that's the line people remember most when they tell the story now. Not that the dean accused him. Not even that the committee caught the lie. It's what Malik said after the dust settled, when somebody asked him how he kept going. He said, "When they tried to reduce me to a file, I made sure the file told the truth." And maybe that's the lesson that stays with you after everything else fades. Not every victory comes from having more power. Sometimes it comes from refusing to surrender your reality to people who expect exhaustion to do their work for them. Sometimes dignity is loud. Sometimes dignity is a binder full of dates. Sometimes dignity is walking back onto the same campus that tried to spit you out, not because you forgot what happened, but because you decided your future would not be built around someone else's smallness. That is how Malik graduates 2 years later. Top honors. Research, distinction. Mother in the front row. Nia yelling too loud when they call his name. Aisha crying while pretending not to. And when he crosses the stage, there is no dean waiting at the end of the line. Just space. Just light. Just the long, hard-earned proof that he was never what they accused him of being. He was what they were afraid he already was. Brilliant, unshaken, and impossible to erase. If this story stayed with you, let it stay for the right reason. Not because injustice is shocking, but because truth, when somebody protects it long enough, can still win in rooms built to deny it.